recording my homily for the first Sunday of Advent in 2019. And so if you remember in Advent, you have 4 weeks, right? So that's why we have an Advent wreath. If you don't have an Advent wreath, it's a great thing to have in your house. You can pray together as a family every night. But you remember we light 1 candle for each week, and each week has a certain symbol. Now, there's a general movement in Advent where the first thing we do is we remember or we reflect on the fact that we're still waiting for Jesus to come back again, right? So we focus on the second coming of Jesus. So the first part of Advent, really not thinking about Christmas. Christmas is like the remembering when he came the first time. The first part of Advent is a looking to the future of his second coming. Now, if somebody's tempted to think, well, that's way off in the future because that's like the end of the world, right? Remember, yes, but also remember the second coming, the particular second coming of Jesus, he comes for each of us. And so there will be someday each of us is going to die, right? And we were going to go before Jesus. And that could be tomorrow. It could actually be today. I'm standing right on the edge of this dock. But it could be at some point soon. It could be some 90 years from now, whenever, right? Okay, but we focus on that because when we lose sight of the fact that our life is ordered toward this end, then we become distracted in life. So this kind of helps us. This first Sunday of Advent helps us to really focus, right? Yesterday I was reading in my morning prayer, so the Office of Readings in the Liturgy of the Hours, and the saint had a particular focus, and he said, remember when Jesus came the first time, right? Remember Jesus came the first time. He came and we judged him, right? We rendered judgment on him. That's why he died on the cross. We rendered a judgment of execution on him. When he comes back again, he will judge us. And so to be mindful of that. Yes, he's all merciful, but yes, there is justice in this world. Okay. All right. The first Sunday of Advent, also we focus on hope. So if the first Sunday is hope, the second Sunday is peace. The third week is, I always forget, joy. And then the fourth week of Advent is love. Okay, so we're in hope. Hope is perfect because it focuses on the future, right? If we're living our faith here today, then we look at the future in a particular way, which is hope. Because we see Jesus working today, thus we see him working in the future as well. All right, so the focus is of hope. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about hope, what it is and what it isn't, what destroys it and what helps it. Okay? All right, so I was visiting my family and I was just reflecting on just the nature of our different personalities. I was visiting my sister with her husband and they have 5 kids. They range in age from like 16 to 4. And everybody's different, right? And I'm not necessarily saying that this was of any one of them or anything like that, but just reflecting on it when I was a kid too. So, you know, kids, when they don't want to get up, it's like there's this long, drawn-out process of getting that kid out of bed, right? Now, some kids, they're just up. They're just up. They're up with the roosters, man. There's nothing holding them down. But then there's other kids, and I'd put myself in this category definitely when I was a teenager. Man, it takes a tractor to pull you out of bed, right? It's like mom and dad got to go get the tractor just to get you out of bed. So the stages that you kind of watch someone who doesn't want to get out of bed. So first they're asleep. Okay, then you go and you wake them up, right? Now the first step is they just start moaning. It's just like, oh, and they're not going to move. There's no movement. If anything, you know, like when you're digging for clams, the first thing they do is they try to dig down farther. That's what we do when we don't want to get out of bed. We try to slink in under the covers farther, right? So there's this moaning phase. It's like, okay, I know he's alive, he's moaning, but I got to give him a few minutes, okay? Then you have the zombie phase. The zombie phase is where they're out of bed and they're walking, but the brain's still not working, right? So in the moaning phase, in the zombie phase, you don't really want to give them instructions on life. You don't want to tell them, hey, this is what you're going to be doing today. They're not listening to anything, okay? All right. Now, especially if you wake them up and you say, hey, guess what? You get to mow the lawn today. It doesn't help the process at all, right? Okay, then after the zombie phase, you kind of have the groggy phase, and this is where, okay, they're listening, they're interacting. They may say good morning, but it's usually morning. It's usually just not very engaging. They might get their coffee, then they wake up, and then they're excited about their day, and they're fully awake. All right. Now, you know what changes that whole process? Is if you wake them up in the morning, and you say, hey, remember it's Saturday, and we're going camping. Right now, I'm assuming you love camping. For me as a kid, that would have been like, bing, I'm out of bed, right? I skip the whole moaning, zombie, groggy. I skip all of that. Now, what was the difference? What's the difference between that and a school day where it's like, oh, I don't want to go to school, right? It's desire, right? It's all desire. It's whether I want something in my day or I don't want something in my day. Depression is something that people struggle with a lot, especially during the season. Depression is when a person wants something, but they can't have it, right? That's like the first stage of depression. I want something in my life, but I can't have it. It could be something really serious, like I lost a loved one, they passed away, I want them back, I wish they never passed away, but I can't have it, and so I become depressed, right? Well, how we look at our day, whether or not we have hope, it kind of depends on this desire. It's like, what am I desiring? Do I desire something that's not realistic? Something that's not reality? It's not in the present. Because if I do, then I lend myself over to a spiritual form of depression, and I'm not going to have hope. Because hope is not rooted on what's unrealistic. It's rooted on what God desires, and that my desire matches God's desires. That's what hope is. My desire matches God's desire. Okay? And so as I look to the future, I want what God wants. Then there's always great hope. Okay? Another way to look at this in terms of like depression is also like boredom. Boredom. Have you ever tried to define what is boredom? It's not a certain set of circumstances. It's simply the desire that is within the person. So you go to Mass, sometimes, people will come in confession and say, Father, I just don't like going to church. And so I ask them, so why not? And they say, well, Mass is just kind of boring. Now, Mass is not boring. It is more for adults, but a person has to be open to it, has to want to go deep with it. Because if they don't, then they become bored. Now, what's going on when they become bored? They're desiring something else. There's something else they want. So they're at Mass. They're like, man, I wish I could be going and watching that football game. I wonder what we're having for lunch. Oh, I got all my homework coming up. I wonder what I'm going to write that paper on. I mean, it's just all these ideas, all these thoughts. Now, they're looking to the future. They're looking at what's going to come after the Mass, right? So they're thinking about all these things, but they're not desiring that which is present. And therefore, their future is not about hope. It's just about their own selfish desires. It's just what they want. And so they're bored, or they're boring, right? Okay. These are contrary things to hope. This is not what hope is. Okay? I know we all say, boy, I hope in the future I can go have pizza for lunch. I hope. But that's not real hope. That's not divine hope. Right? That's not what Advent's about. Advent is, I hope I can be closer. I hope I can grow in my faith more. I hope I can be closer to Jesus. I hope I can be part of His mission. I hope that I can help other people grow in their faith. I hope that I can bring healing into people's lives. I hope I can conquer my temptations. I hope I can conquer the sin that's in my life. All those things, right? Okay. A couple thoughts on just these aspects of it. So when I went to visit with my family, I also went to visit a friend, and there was this moment where this friend was telling me about this injury that he has, or this thing that he was struggling with, and as he's talking, I noticed my brain stop listening, And I began to think of my own injuries, my own problems. You know, we do this in conversation, right? You might be doing this right now. is somebody says something and then there's this narcissistic movement that happens and I begin to think about myself. Now, what has happened? I have become bored with the other person, not because they were boring, but because I was narcissistic. I was self-centered. And so I stopped listening to the other person. Now, as soon as this person was done telling me about themselves, I began to tell them about myself. And so there was a lack of compassion. There was a lack of care. There was a lack of love. It was all just about me. And I noticed on my vacation for Thanksgiving, I did that several times. And yes, I do it, but what was different for me this time was I really came to my awareness that it's like, wow, I'm really self-centered. They're just telling me about something going on, and then I immediately changed the conversation to me. I've always struggled with that on some level, but it was amazing how it just was brought to my attention. Now, that's contrary to hope because I begin to turn the world, I push the world away and I turn in on myself. So there's no hope in that. So we know that we're doing better. So if you're looking for a sign that you're doing better on this narcissistic movement, is that when somebody's talking to you, you legitimately want to know and you care about what they're saying. And then you ask them questions. You say, oh, really? Yeah. So what are you planning? Well, whatever the question may be. But you're interested. You're invested in what that person is saying. That is a sign of charity. But it then begins to point to the future. Say, I wonder what's going to happen on this or that. It means you really care about them. Okay. So the movement, a sign of hope, is that when I'm face to face with somebody, I want to be present to them and not just have them be present to me, right? Okay. All right. When I was driving between my sister's house and my brother's house, so we had two parties, two different family parties. I had to drive down Highway 7. So if you've ever been to Paradise on Mount Rainier, you've had to go down Highway 7. So my sister, they live all the way down by Mount Rainier. Well, so I'm coming out to Highway 7, and then I get out there, and it's completely blocked. They have barricades. They completely block the freeway. And I was like, what is going on? Because that's really unusual. You know, the morning after Thanksgiving, they're not doing construction. So I was really upset, and I'm driving, so I have to drive all the way around. So anyways, I call my sister and I tell her, because she hasn't left the house yet, I say, look, you can't drive down Highway 7. It's completely blocked off. I don't know what's going on. But I'm mad because I'm being inconvenienced, right? So we can all be that way. We hit a traffic jam, and it's like, how dare they? How dare they cause a traffic jam when I'm running late, right? Well, my sister texts me back, and there's a news article about what had happened. And so that night, 3 sheriff's deputies had pulled over this person, and he had been causing problems. He was scaring some people. He was doing something. They haven't really said what he was doing, but he confronted the sheriff's deputies. He refused to submit to them. There was a shooting, and he ended up perishing. He ended up dying in the shooting. And I'm thinking to myself, as I'm reading this, wow, my first response was just so selfish. Here you have 3 sheriff's deputies. Their lives are never going to be the same because they were involved in this shooting, right? This particular person who's dead, I mean, obviously what a horrible thing to have happen. And his family and the sheriff's deputies' families, all these people, here you are celebrating Thanksgiving, and this horrible thing happens way out in this farming area. Or not farming, but just this out of the city. You don't expect this to happen, especially Thanksgiving night. And so I found myself praying for all of them that whole day. It was really a grace-filled moment. But to have this hope, right? It was rooted in a hope that, as horrible as that was, that God can infiltrate all of that and bring some healing into that situation. And so that's what I think true hope is. And I was so thankful to God that He gave me that grace to be able to get beyond myself, my own selfish things. It's like whether I was going to be late or not. And the thing about what had happened, and then to pray for them, right? I think that's what I was able to do in that moment. As I was driving home from that vacation, I passed through Muckleshoot, so that's by Auburn. And I was at a stoplight, and I looked over and I saw this gentleman just sitting on one of these traffic barriers. He wasn't in the road or anything, but just off on the side. There was no sidewalk there, and you could tell there was something wrong with him. Not that he was on drugs or anything. You could tell he just looked really, really depressed, because he wasn't anywhere a person naturally would be. And he was just sitting there, like the statue of the thinking man, where he's got his just like this. But he looked really, really depressed, as something was wrong. And I did what everybody else did, just passed him. So my conscience said, maybe you should stop. Maybe you should just stop. Say something to him, see if he's okay. I didn't listen to my conscience, and I just kept going. And you know what my first thought was? My first thought was, something looks wrong, yes, but what if it's like a 3-hour conversation? And so my first thought was, something looks wrong. My second thought was, I don't want to be inconvenienced. I don't know, I was a really horrible person. So I didn't stop. So there was, on some level, a betrayal of hope in that, right? I didn't stop for him. I used to do stuff like that all the time. But now, it's like I've gotten in this mode where, oh no, I'm too busy. Another sign that somebody has hope, that somebody, how they view life, how they live in the present, but they live in the present with hope. They often are people who are asking if they can help, right? Can I help you out? Can I do this? Now, when I go visit family, the thing I often do is I often offer to help wash the dishes. Now, the reason I do that is because I love washing dishes. There's no sacrifice there. I love doing it. So that's not necessarily an act of charity, but what would be a better example? So I'm reading a book on St. Catherine of Siena, and I've never really read anything on her, and it's really exciting. It's just, man, her life was just so incredible. So I'm reading this life on St. Catherine of Siena. Well, when she was younger, she was a nurse in the hospital, like a volunteer nurse. So she would go in the hospital, and back then being a nurse meant you really just taking care of the person, right? There wasn't all this complicated medication and all this stuff that they had back then. You're just taking care of the person. Well, in this hospital, the other nurses knew that Catherine wanted to help the most difficult patients. So they would always give her the people who were just mean and nasty and irascible and people super, super unpleasant. And there was this one particular person, Andrea, who was probably the worst. Now, at first she started out really nice, but in her mind, now this is how Satan works, in her mind, there was no possible way that Catherine could be that loving and that joyful and not be living a sinful life somewhere where she's indulging in some kind of sinful pleasures, and that's why she's so happy, right? That's why she's so joyful. There's no way she could be engaging and taking care of all this misery and difficulties. Now, Andrea had a particular disease that was causing this open wound, and it smelled horrible. And so that was one of the reasons none of the other nurses wanted to even be around her. And even Catherine really struggled to overcome her bodily repulsion to the smell. But she would force herself out of love for Andrea. So Andrea begins to think in her mind that Catherine must be indulging in sin, in sinful pleasures, right? She must have a man that she's cheating, that she's living with or something. So she begins to tell everybody that Saint Catherine is living a very sinful life, that she's doing these wicked things. And she starts spreading this around to anybody who will listen. Well, before you know it, Catherine's superior is hearing this, and people in the town are coming to hear this. Now, when Catherine's mother finds out about this, her mom, she says, "You will not take care of that wicked woman anymore," because of what she's doing to Catherine. And Catherine just says, "Mom, what would Jesus do? Right? What did we do to Jesus? He didn't deserve anything that we did to him, and he kept loving us." She says, "Mom, I have to do this. I have to love her." And she would say one of the most beautiful things. She would say, "The reason I would care for these people is because they are my brothers and sisters, and I want to help them get to heaven. And many of them had deep sins, deep hurts." She says, "I want to help them. I want to help them get to heaven." So she kept caring for her, for Andrea, even through that whole just horrible mess. Now, if you were Catherine, would you keep caring for a person like that? I kind of jokingly said, I'd go pull the oxygen tube. I'd disconnect that thing. Now, obviously, I'm joking, but just the level of forgiveness and charity and humility that Catherine had. So, did Catherine find those people boring? No, not at all. Because she saw opportunities to share the faith. It was exciting for her in that sense. It was difficult, but exciting. Was Catherine depressed about having to do that? Absolutely not. She looked forward to it every day to wake up to do that because of what she knew God could do through it. Was she a person of hope? Yes. She knew that by being faithful, God could work through that. All right. Well, eventually she broke through the heart of Andrea, and Andrea repented of what she had said and what she had done, and she was able to eventually die in peace and reconciled with Catherine and with the church, and very beautiful. There's so many stories about St. Catherine where she was able to conquer the evil in that moment and bring that person to peace and to bring harmony back into that situation. The desire to help, right? Can I help you? Do you need any help? A person who has that attitude is a person of hope. There's something they can offer. The other thing is people who have gratitude. So we just finished Thanksgiving, right? People have gratitude. It's like, Lord, I'm truly grateful for what I have. So I'm not obsessed about more, which is the Christmas season, right? That's what everybody's doing, more. It's like, no, I'm really happy with what I have. I'm happy with what God has blessed me with. And so then hope is not more. Hope is just the continuation of being able to grow in one's love and faith with God and with our neighbor. And so gratitude. If we're ever struggling with something really difficult in the present, pray, say, okay, Lord, I need to think of 10 things that I'm grateful for. And then pray a Hail Mary for each of them. And it's amazing how that softens our heart. Something like that, right? Okay. The last thing I want to talk about on this, is this the last thing? No, 2 more things. People who have hope like to work. Now, I don't mean work, but they're not afraid. They want to do things. So, for example, when somebody finds the Mass boring, they don't want to make an effort. They're not going to make an effort. So people who often are bored during Mass, they're the people who have not read the readings before Mass. They don't pick up the book to sing the song. They just sit there like a lump. And so they're not making the effort. Whereas somebody who's not bored is making the effort. And so hope implies a desire to do work to bring about something more, right? Okay. All right, last thing. Sometimes when people say, okay, Father, I'm struggling, I'm broken, there's something wrong in my spiritual life, I don't even want to pray, I find prayer boring, what do I do? And I say, you take that and you surrender that to God and you bring it to Him. You give it to Him. So sometimes I'll be talking to somebody and they'll say, I guess in my prayer I'm just bored. It doesn't feel like anything's happening. So I say, then you need to go tell Jesus that He's boring. They're like, oh, no, I can't tell Jesus that. He says, yes, go tell Him that. Be honest with Him. right? A doctor can't help us if we're not honest with the doctor. We need to be honest with Jesus and say, Jesus, you know what? Prayer is time with you, and I find that time boring. Help me. Heal the problem. Heal my soul. Heal the spiritual illness that I have. Okay? So, as we do that, as we surrender those things to Jesus, and we give them to Him, He then can begin to work in our hearts, and we begin to look at the present differently, as well as the future. All right? And then we have hope. Okay, next week for Advent, focusing on peace, and I'll be talking about that. All right, God bless you. Oh, people are always asking me where I record my homilies. I'm just down at the marina in Everett, Washington. It's a beautiful day. I just look for a place. All right, God bless you. Take care.